But again, that consistency over time will snowball. And so that people are like, hey, this person's worth my time. I want to elevate them. I can depend on them. And that's where you start to get those looks or those opportunities to be elevated in lead committees, to be on a board, to, help internally at your day job in more leadership capacity. And so as you think about building your brand, again, the willingness to go above and beyond in a way that is consistent.
Welcome, everybody, to the Building Better Portfolios podcast. This is one of our quick takes with Josh Flade and Paisley Nardini, my co-host. So let's dive in. The topic of today is beyond your day job, building your brand, and networking. Paisley, you have done an amazing job of this. I've witnessed this. Anybody that can go on LinkedIn and look you up has seen what a great job that you are doing with building your brand. And not only that, but also all the things that you've done with the CFA Society in your area and all the other organizations that you participate in. And so I think this is going to be a fantastic topic for us to discuss. So let's just start out with you. I mean, how have you approached building your brand and building your network outside of your day job?
Yeah, well, I love this topic just for the sheer fact that what Josh and I are doing right now is recording a podcast episode that we're doing entirely on our own free time. And this is a prime example. We can loop back to this in a minute, but a lot of what you see in our podcast, whether it's, Josh's contributions, my contributions that, through the CFA board and other society volunteer efforts that we've done, a lot of these seeds were planted long ago. And so I just want to set the stage for today's conversation on building your brand. It's almost like when you have a goal of getting in shape or running a marathon or learning a new language, it's not something that you just snap your fingers. There's a lot of effort and energy that goes into it. And so maybe just starting with the topic of being intentional, I think building out a bit of like a roadmap or a structure of where do you want to be in 5 years? And I intentionally don't say 1 year or 2 years, because again, these are long-term goals, and building your brand is not something that happens overnight. It's a snowball effect of years of who you are, your identity, what you're willing to do, like who you're connecting with. And so being very intentional about where you want to get. And so even if it's, if it's formalized or not, but like really sitting down and saying like, where do I want to be in 5 years? Is there somebody in the industry that I work with or that I've seen that I admire or I look up to, and then trying to figure out like, what have they been doing for the last 5 years? And so that's something that I think would say intentionally did when I first got my CFA charter, I guess, almost 15 years ago, is sitting down and saying like, I couldn't believe it. If I could be the president of the CFA Society, like it was just so overwhelming. And here I am, fast forward a decade and I am. How did that happen? Again, it wasn't overnight. It took a decade to get here. But I think the little steps that one can take to start building that brand, once you figure out where it is you're trying to get to, is volunteering your time. And again, this is what we'll talk about at the beginning of today's conversation, is outside of your day job, outside of working hours, are there organizations either within the walls of where you're employed or in the industry, professional organizations that you can raise your hand and just start showing up to meetings? Maybe it's a networking session, maybe it's a luncheon, and just introducing yourself, meeting people. I think that's number one. Be engaged and be intentional with where and how you're spending your time. And then starting to join committees or groups, right? You show up to a couple events, you meet some people. Now actually start to roll up your sleeves. And this is where the work starts to play out, is like raising your hand and being willing to start a committee and, attract other people to come to this organization and putting the time in. That's where I think this starts to snowball. And so things that I've done, that Josh has done, both of us have spent countless years at the CFA Society in our respective areas, volunteering. And I mean, even once you're on the board, you're still a volunteer. I'd like to also make it clear, because it's not to many people, we don't get paid for any of the CFA volunteer activities. And I think that's another good example too, is I meet so many people fresh out of school that are so excited to get involved and they want to get on the board. And then I'm always asked like, well, which ones pay money? And like, these aren't the corporate boards when you're sitting on the board of like Apple somewhere and getting paid $500,000 for your contributions. All of this is pro bono. And so I think going back to like having intention of where you want to get to, and then understanding that the dividends that building your brand will have eventually are likely not to be experienced in the first several years. Like I didn't get any recognition. I wasn't really visible anywhere. It was just behind the scenes, really working authentically to engage and build a network. And then maybe the last initial comment I will have, something that's super easy, even if you're just starting out in your industry, is go in with the mentality of being a connector. Everybody benefits from being connected to other people. If people need a referral, whether it's an actual job opening or somebody to connect with in the industry that may have an area of expertise, if you're that person who's almost like a Rolodex of, oh, that's so interesting that you're looking to get involved in that. I know someone who did this. Or even if it's something non-work related, a language, a sport, a travel destination, if you become this connector, people start to come to you and see you as that resource. And so that's another really like low lift way to kind of start building your brand and being more visible in a way that's super authentic. So maybe I'll pause, Josh, like any initial thoughts from your perspective?
No, I really like what you said about being authentic, because who knows what's actually going to happen from you volunteering and helping. It's not, there's no guarantee you're going to become the president of the society or all these things, but I find that some of the best advice I've heard, this comes from Arnold Schwarzenegger, where he tells people to be helpful. And I think that that's so true. Just be helpful. And I think the other side of that coin is do what you say you're going to do, and have that. I've heard it said, like, have a high do say ratio, meaning that if you say you're going to do something, do it. And that is so important in every organization that you participate in, because I have participated on many different boards throughout the years, and other volunteer opportunities. And you always have those people that come in and they're super gung ho and they're excited and they have all this energy. And then you give them a few assignments and they fall flat on their face.
Yeah.
And then suddenly within a month or 2 or 3 months, they just kind of disappear. So my advice would be come in, raise your hand, volunteer to help, and just do what you say you're going to do, and do it consistently for a long period of time. And so many opportunities are going to come your way.
I think that's such a really important point, is the consistency. Again, if you're building an authentic brand to the point that, you're on a board somewhere, you're leading a committee, you're a well-known, individual in your respective, industry or organization, that people start to loop in on projects and opportunities and speaking engagements, whatever it might be, it's not because you did one thing awesome once. It's because you were consistent, and you don't have to, show up 100% energy every single time, but just show up every time. And I think, again, knowing that you are dependable, that you're consistent, is going to take you so much further. And so maybe even just going into like examples of networking again, like if you show up to an industry happy hour or an organization like luncheon educational event, and your goal is to just get business cards because you need a job, like that. And I think at this point, like, people know not to do that, but there's still one or two people that you've never heard from this person before, and they're like reaching out, asking for your time. And they're luckily honest and just say, I'm looking for a job. It's like, well, why would I want to take my own time if I don't know you well to help you when you're just coming when you actually need it? So planting those seeds early, and then really going in with like, I might not get anything out of this. And it's difficult sometimes. It can be exhausting, like just repeatedly showing up and giving. But again, that consistency over time will snowball. And so that people are like, hey, this person's worth my time. I want to elevate them. I can depend on them. And that's where you start to get those looks or those opportunities to be elevated in lead committees, to be on a board, to, help internally at your day job in more leadership capacity. And so as you think about building your brand, again, the willingness to go above and beyond in a way that is consistent. And then it also requires a lot of hours outside of your day job, which ultimately is a sacrifice. And so again, being intentional, not taking on too much. I think that's something that I've learned the hard way. But really being thoughtful about, where am I going to get the best exposure for what I'm looking to create for myself, 5 years forward. And that really comes down, a prime example, again, Josh and I have given a lot to our respective CFA societies, and there's other volunteer efforts we've both taken on. But that wasn't just a 1 or 2 year term. Between the two of us, I think we've spent nearly 2 decades supporting our societies. But what we have to show for that now is not the CFA charter per se. It's this network and this community across really the world that we've built. And so now we have these kind of like tangible outreaches that we can use in our respective networks to continue to grow. So maybe just pivoting a little bit, we've talked a little bit about outside of your day job, but all of this, and again, we're not talking about volunteering for a cat shelter here. We're talking about building your brand within your respective organization. So all of this ties back to our day job in some aspect. Josh, what thoughts or advice would you have for our listeners around like how they can start just maybe in their day job before they're even thinking about volunteering time outside of work?
Yeah, and before we dive into that, the one thing I would recommend people read is a book called Give and Take. I think it does a really good job. This is by Adam Grant. It does a really good job of talking about like just different kinds of people. There's people that give way more than they take. There's people that take way more than they give, and all these different relationships and everything that they do. And I do think that there's something that's a commonality between the two of us is I think we both like to give more than we take. Like if at the end of my life, there was like this tally, I would hope that I've given more than I've taken. And that's just the way I like to operate, I guess you could say. And I think that that pays off over the long run. So I would definitely recommend people read that book. So as far as your question though, I think you spend so much time at work. So I think everything about you has to start there and the brand that you're building at work. And so some little things, I started my career at Goldman, which was just an amazing place to learn and grow. And some of the little things that I took away from that experience was one, become a subject matter expert, because you want everybody on your floor and everybody to look at you and say, that person knows so much about X, Y, and Z. So whenever a question comes up about X, Y, and Z, I know exactly who to go. I need to go to Paisley. I need to go to Josh. Some other little pieces of advice that I think are helpful in building your brand is I received this advice when I first joined Goldman. It was, you need to do three things. You need to work harder than everybody else. You need to be nicer than everybody else, because sometimes when you outwork other people, there can be some animosity built up. But if you're really nice, that takes away the animosity. So that's why those two things are so important. And then the last piece was don't gossip. And I think that regardless of whatever job you're in, if you can do those three things successfully, you can build a really good brand for yourself of being a hard worker. And I think this is really good career advice, especially early on in your career. But then what you want to do is you want to build off of that foundation and become a subject matter expert and start doing all these things that you need to do to really build a stronger brand. So that way people really come to know you and know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. You're going to do it with a very high level of quality. And I think that all of that plays into building that brand for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things when I was, just out of school and starting, everything feels really overwhelming. So again, thinking about the fact that most people love being able to connect people and offer advice. And I say this kind of sheepishly, but like people love to hear themselves talk. And I say that because if you see someone who you think has done a awesome job of elevating themselves, building a brand, pick their brain, ask them questions. How did they get there? What did they have to do? And like chances are, again, it didn't happen overnight. They set the foundation years ago. But if you share where you'd like to get to or what you're working on and ask explicitly, do you have any advice on how I can get there? I guarantee you people will. And I'll share an example too, just in the CFA Society. Since I've been in a leadership capacity on the board, there's so many people that are volunteering their time that never tell me that they have intentions of joining the board. And so I would just assume, well, if they've not shared their intentions, they enjoy the committee work and volunteering, and they just want the flexibility to come and go. Awesome. Appreciate that. There's other people that after years of volunteering say like, well, how do I get on the board? I've always wanted to join. It's like, well, speak up. So I think that's another thing too, is like being really vocal. And I think that goes a long way too, as you're networking at these events. Everybody kind of chats about the weather, their job, being busy, travel, that kind of thing. But if all of a sudden you're having a conversation with someone and you're like, this is what I'm working towards, and this is where I'm looking to get, and this is what I've done to get there, chances are that person's gonna be like, oh, wow, this is a refreshing, different, conversation. And like, that's how you really start to connect and build these relationships. So being willing to put yourself out there, being willing to raise your hand. And as Josh mentioned, again, being consistent. If you are going to sign up for something, show up, do the work. And if your plans change and you can't any longer, that's okay too. But just being communicative. I just think in this day and age, it really sets people apart from the pack. So this is a topic that is very near and dear to Josh and I both. So if you guys have any questions or any follow up, I'm sure either of us would be happy to chat with you. But that's really all we got for today's quick take.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and do not reflect the views, opinions, or policies of any current or former employer, affiliated firm, or client. The content is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice. Nothing discussed constitutes a recommendation to buy or sell any securities or investment products. Listeners should conduct their own research or consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. The hosts are speaking solely in their personal capacities, and the podcast is not affiliated with, sponsored by, or endorsed by any firm or organization with which they may be associated.